Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. I am your host, MongoSlade. Today, we're going to talk about the Bray Wyatt Becoming Immortal biography. An excellent biography on Wyndham Rotunda, aka Bray Wyatt. It is probably one of the best produced WWE documentaries ever. Like, legitimately ever. Going into the, they didn't go into every nook and cranny of his life, but there was so much backstage footage and so much secondary material of them talking to Jason Baker and Rob Fee and all this kind of stuff. I thought it was absolutely tremendous. And they gave his family some love. They really spent a little bit of time laying the foundation for, his uncle and his dad, who were the tag team champions in WWE during the early 80s US Express, and how that triggered his love for wrestling and him watching his dad wrestle The Undertaker to him wrestling The Undertaker himself, which I thought was a fantastic full circle moment, especially when his mom is in the documentary saying like he used to have Undertaker action figures and now he's getting in there to wrestle him. That put a smile on my face, man, because I really kind of cringe when a guy's entire career is in WWE. And Bray Wyatt never wrestled anywhere else. He only wrestled in WWE, so all the material that you see is WWE material. So even if it's FCW material, it's WWE material. He's never done anything else. So you watched him craft this character in developmental, and him struggling as Husky Harris, him struggling even as Bray Wyatt, and the character kind of runs its course, and maybe it takes one too many losses, depending on how you may feel about that kind of thing. And the character loses direction, and the power of his creativity and how he could adapt and reinvent himself is just really good. And one of my favorite things about this is the relationship between Bo Dallas, or the Taylor Rotunda, and Wyndham Rotunda, is that Bo actually got into wrestling first. Bray Wyatt wanted to play football, and football wasn't working out for him, and he sees that Bo is doing well in WWE's developmental territory, so he actually drops out of college to go join Bo, and they create a tag team of Bo and Duke Rotundo in FCW. And his dad was there to watch, and they were in these basically like these high school gyms. It looked real shabby, but you see a lot of their personality, and you see a lot of how these guys are trying to do something. They're using, of course, their dad's name, Rotundo, which is the WWE version of his name, by the way. His name was Rotunda. In any event, he talked a little bit about his time in NXT, specifically Husky Harris, and how that was a difficult time for him because it was clear that the name was put together to make fun of him and make fun of his weight, and how it was a terrible time for him. He wasn't having fun. He didn't like it. He didn't understand it. He couldn't find what Husky Harris was supposed to be. And they played some audio of Wyndham saying that this was a terrible time. It was a figment of somebody else's imagination. Basically, WWE Creative had come up with this really stupid idea of Husky Harris and shoved him into it. So we get the idea that Triple H, the Lord and Savior of Bray Wyatt, apparently, according to this documentary, he takes over developmental, is turned into NXT as we know it, and Bray Wyatt is given an opportunity to become Bray Wyatt. He's sent back to FCW, where him and Dusty and everybody get together and put together this gimmick of what they would call Bray Wyatt, and how, Wyndham becomes inspired by Waylon Mercy. He's also inspired by a friend of his by the name of Bray Wyatt. And this Bray Wyatt apparently has a paralyzed face. So this sounds like something out of a Garth Ennis comic book. Like if you didn't read Preacher or something like that, he's had characters in there like Arseface, who got, guy put a shotgun in his mouth and now his face is all twisted up and stuff. That's what this Bray Wyatt guy sounds like. It's like he has a paralyzed face. And I'm like, what? So now he goes around headbutting things and he can't feel anything. It's like, what? What the hell? What a person. Bring him on television. Anyway, the 2012, Bray starts finding the voice of Bray Wyatt, Well, Wyndham starts finding the voice of Bray Wyatt, the mannerisms, the dress, everything started coming together. And then they started putting together the Wyatt family with John Huber and Eric Rowan, and everything starts cooking with grease at this point. Everything is looking great. They talked about, how they came to find the voice of the Wyatt family. And I believe it was Eric Rowan who said they used to study the interviews of death row inmates about how they thought and how they would speak and things of this nature. And I'm like, they're doing method acting. I mean, they're doing really deep study of things outside of wrestling. They're studying movies. They're studying, death row inmates. Like, wow, this stuff's crazy. So they started having some success. They get wildly successful. And John Cena notes how quickly the Wyndham turned it around. How he went from Husky Harris, who had no direction, no real persona, was there to be mocked and made fun of, and how just a couple of years later, he's Bray Wyatt, completely new gimmick, and he has now the stroke that he can wrestle John Cena, and it'd be a believable match, as opposed to when he was Husky Harrison, it was completely not believable at all. And I'm glad that they ignored it, but when they got to that point and John Cena was talking about that, I couldn't help but remember the first few times I saw Bray Wyatt and I used to hear the smart fans chant, Husky Harris, and they would chant it at him. They never forgot. Like, eventually Bray Wyatt got so over that those chants died away. But when he first got started, you used to be able to hear it on Raw. People still chanting Husky Harris at him. It was pathetic. So that was fun. Seeing him go from Husky Harris to Bray Wyatt, that transformation is fun. When he starts to do more theatrical stuff, we start seeing about Jason Baker and the costuming for the masks and the jackets and everything that he would do for The Fiend and do for later versions of Bray Wyatt. That stuff was tremendous too. Had a lot of fun with that. I also loved seeing that Wyndham was a kid who was really into horror. He loved Ghostbusters and Beetlejuice, and he read Goosebumps and anything that's horror based about monsters and things like this. He just loved it. And those were the things that he brought into wrestling. And I've always said that a lot of wrestlers, they suck because they're boring. They're not interested into anything. Not for real. Even when Wyndham got fired, he went into the sort of occult stuff with him and his brother going, spelunking into caves, looking for cryptids. It's like, this is stuff that they would do in their spare time. And now they're going to bring that into wrestling like they're not boring guys. So many of these dudes are such wrestling fans that all they care about is wrestling. And all they want to do is wrestling. And it's like, oh, that's so painfully boring. But you had Wyndham and Taylor, they were interested in other things. And they bring in their love of other genres into pro wrestling, and it's a rough do. Triple H talks a lot about this, that Bray Wyatt became a little bit difficult to deal with, because once he had gotten over, he started taking some ownership of the character. It became difficult to get him to focus, his ideas, and to be able to adapt some of his ideas. And Triple H also became very concerned with that damn ring. How would we turn this into a match? How do we get this in the ring? And I get it. That's the business of live performances. And if Bray fall in love with the camera, like, with the Firefly Funhouse and all the cool stuff that he was doing, how does that eventually turn into him wrestling at live events so that he can draw money, draw tickets and all this kind of stuff? I get that, but when Triple H started really criticizing him for, like, okay, how do we get this in the ring? How do we get this between the bells? I was kind of like, well, it depends on what he wanted to do. I get it when they started doing like the Burn Fiend stuff, and even he reached his breaking point that he absolutely couldn't do it anymore because he hated that suit and he was getting frustrated and he was very irritable. And I think a lot of people who do that heavy casting, it does become that way. I've seen a lot of actors get real agitated because they have to walk around in those very hot suits all day. And because it was during the pandemic, they could get away with it. You know, him doing the melted fiend and all this kind of stuff. But I could tell, because I've seen a lot of other actors get into this stuff, that it becomes draining. You have to do the same thing over and over again. Now you're asking him to wrestle in it. He's got to work in it. And he can't. He can't move in that thing. But then again, it wasn't created for the wrestling part. It was created for the look, for the theatrical. It was created for the camera, not for the ring. So they tell you the story that basically Bray Wyatt was becoming a bit of an issue, and that led to his brief separation from WWE. Of course, this was shortly after John Huber, Brody Lee, passed away, and he was emotionally destroyed and probably became a little bit more irritable and more controlling over the gimmick. And I say, like, it sounds to me from what Triple H was saying that we started almost to have an Ultimate Warrior kind of syndrome, where he had put so much of himself into Bray Wyatt that he didn't want anybody changing his ideas. He didn't want anybody touching his stuff, like, leave my stuff to how it is. But he would come back and change things 100 times and expected other people to basically just bend and twist and say, okay, sure. And it wasn't working out. And that the creative differences, along with the emotional issues that he was undergoing, felt like they needed to take a break from each other. And it took he was under WWE contract for 10 years. That's a long time. And he was separated for maybe 15 months, maybe 12 months. So I like that. The creation of The Fiend, of course, was amazing. He talked about that The Fiend is a character that comes right out of, Wyndham's nightmares. I love that Bruce Pritchard was there, who had worked on the Firefly Funhouse and did all of those vignettes and told the story of where the Fiend had come from and the Firefly Funhouse, which I knew was inside of Bray's mind, which made no sense when Seth Rollins invaded it that one time and burned it. It's like, how could he invade Bray's mind and set it on fire? That's stupid. They didn't address that in this documentary at all. So I wonder whose idea that was. So they discussed the big White Rabbit reveal where they put Rob Fee, Wyndham, Triple H, and Triple H was involved with everything, by the way. They put together these clues that led to the Bray Wyatt reveal at Extreme Rules. And it was one of the biggest pops ever. It was a huge pop when he returned. That was fantastic. I thought that was tremendous. And that was a very short run. It was interesting because Bray returned and then he did that really emotional promo on SmackDown shortly after his return, which Sami Zayn says is his favorite Bray Wyatt promo. And then you get almost nothing. You get you're back to the theater stuff with Bray, back to the characters. And I remember people getting frustrated about that time, but they didn't address that because it didn't seem to really fit the narrative. But there was that time there right after he re-debuted where people were kind of like, okay, where is this going? He's coming out here, he's cutting promos. This Uncle Howdy is there, and Uncle Howdy and Bray are arguing, and you're not sure if Uncle Howdy is in Bray's mind or what's going on here. And people started to grumble, And then he had, of course, the feud with LA Knight, which people hated, by the by. And he worked his last live event in February 26th, 2023, and would, pretty much be out medically for 6 months before he eventually passed away. So you get that run was very abbreviated following his return. But it was a creative masterpiece leading up to the return. Everything afterwards, though, shrug. Now, I did really like the family stuff. Love the element of them talking about how his kids inspire him and how every time he had a child, he felt creatively refreshed and he would try to do something new and do something different. I love when JoJo showed us his art pieces that he had in his house. I thought that was tremendous, And I loved when they showed him drawing and he said he just found out that he could draw. I thought that was beautiful. Like, he seemed like a really good-natured guy. And the business could definitely use more Bray Wyatts. Could definitely use more guys who are into characters, who are, study the things that they're into, take ownership of their gimmicks, even to the detriment of their relationships business-wise. Because, I know that Bray Wyatt as a gimmick was owned by WWE because it was created under WWE. He couldn't take it and go anywhere else. But his creativity is his own. If he could have taken what he wanted to do and done something different, it'd have been slightly different than when Bray Wyatt was. He could have done something else somewhere else. But him doing his entire career in WWE makes him feel like one of those homegrown guys, a lot like John Cena, a lot like Roman Reigns, a lot like Randy Orton, where you saw him from the first time a bell rang with him in it to the last time a bell rang with him in it. And there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. The home movies, the backstage material, the concept art for a lot of his characters. All this stuff is packed into this documentary, and it's very good. Well, let me know what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
Old non-aggression. Once that lesson sets in, you'll see a session. But you got an affection for no progression, regression. The